it can definitely consume you. And I do feel like there should be balance of like, okay, don't let it like take over your life to where you can't just enjoy regular things. But, are you going to be able to enjoy regular things until you get to the point, of what your heart's desire is? It's always a balance. But I would never tell anyone going through this that wants to become a parent to just, oh, it'll happen and when it's supposed to.
If you guys are like me and wanting to be more mindful about what's in your products, how many toxins are in your products, and making sure that you're putting good things on your skin and into your body, I highly recommend Osea. I did a total revamp on all my products, and this is one I have been using and now is a staple in my bathroom. I particularly love their Ocean Eyes Age Defining Serum. I feel like I don't have bags under my eyes anymore, and I just feel really good putting this on my skin, knowing something good is going on my skin and into my body. So if you want to check out Osea's products, use our code QTCPOD10 to get 10% off your first purchase. Sherri, it's so nice to have you here. I'm really grateful to have you join us on Quiet the Clock and for you to share your story and just your journey. I think anytime we share and we talk about these things, it's so helpful and it sort of brings things out of isolation and brings things out of the dark. So I just want to, and I think it's still a vulnerable thing to be having, you're on YouTube and you share your story, but I think it's still like really a vulnerable thing to be doing. So I thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy talking about this. So anytime.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'd love to just sort of jump in. And if you can share with the audience, I know you're on YouTube, which that was one of my questions. Maybe we could start there is just what prompted you to start your channel? What prompted you to start sharing? Again, it's a really vulnerable thing.
Yeah. That's a great place to start. YouTube for me is like I watch YouTube the way people watch like regular TV. I probably watch a lot more YouTube than even regular TV. So for me, when we were starting our journey, I was doing a lot of research there. And, I noticed that there was kind of a big gap in, more like African American and, people of color sharing their stories about infertility. And so we kind of just started documenting our journey as a way to remember it. And I've always been someone who's a very photographic memory. And so I like to capture moments and remember things. And I just remember saying that, I would love one day for our child to be able to kind of look back to where we started almost as a video diary of how they were conceived and, how they were brought into this world. And so that's why I initially shared. And I also just wanted to kind of share my experience and hoping that, maybe others wouldn't feel alone either. Because the people that I followed and I watched, I was watching their journeys from, them getting the news that they needed infertility treatment to the days that their babies were born. I was crying with them. You know what I mean?
I know.
And so you become very invested in that and the story and the journey and the ups and downs. And it was kind of I felt like sharing there was easier than sharing on Facebook or Instagram where people knew me more personally. I wasn't making those videos for them. I was making the videos for the people that I had never met that were struggling the way that I was and, were looking for someone or some hope in talking to it. And as a result of it, I've been able to grow this amazing community of people. And I've met some of the most amazing people who are my best friends now, that were going through the journey at the same time as me. And now we're planning play dates for our daughters. So it's
full circle,
such a full circle moment in being able to share and get to that point with strangers.
Yeah. And the community is so hugely important. I think it's one of those things I know for myself when I'm in my fertility journey now too. And it's when loss happens or I'm in it.
Yeah.
When loss happens, I found for myself where I go to is the women and the people that have already been through it. And while
Yeah.
Like some of them might not be like my very best friends. Like a lot of my very best friends haven't been through this journey. So I
Hmm.
especially like right after a loss or those weeks after where I'm kind of really in the depths of it, I
Yeah.
really find myself going to those places and those communities.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also find, I wonder if this is your experience too, or I also find sometimes hearing other people's journeys or being too in the community can be hard for me too.
Hmm.
Like when you
Hmm.
say, like, I've watched people go from, I guess just to be really like honest and open, sometimes seeing other people's successes for me
Yes.
can be hard, and I
Yeah.
feel both things. Like I'm obviously so happy for them, but then it's like
Yeah.
upsetting for me for too. And I'm curious, like, have you had those experiences too in when you're in community and in those places of support?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's hard. You always are wondering, like, you're scrolling through your Facebook group and everything, and you're like, when is it going to be my turn? You know? Um, and at the same time, I always found that it was harder to, like, it was harder for me to be, not to be happy for people that didn't need infertility, but it didn't bother me as much when someone in like my one of the infertility Facebook groups that I was in, when they had success versus someone that didn't need the treatment.
Yeah,
But overall, I mean, it's still hard. It was hard to like walk by the baby section in Target. Like, it's just, yeah, it's hard. Like, I had to take breaks sometimes from being in the groups, and I had to be like, okay, I need to not check any of the groups for a while because, it's triggering. I mean, even now, like, I don't even look at some of the groups that I looked at before. Like, there's maybe one Facebook group that I'm still in.
hmm,
But it's probably because those, like, a lot of the people in that group, it's smaller. A lot of those people have become my friends, like, we're on the exact same journey, but like, it's still triggering sometimes to see people post about like, their loss and their grievances. And I always have the utmost sympathy for those people because I understand it. But, I always say in some of my posts, like, I know you're probably scrolling this wondering the same thing I used to wonder, when is it going to be my turn?
mm,
And so, like, there's always a sense of guilt sometimes when you post things now, being on the other side of it, because
totally.
I still hold space for a lot of people that have not, gotten their babies yet.
Yeah.
But it can be hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think, yeah, I think I just like to kind of bring that honesty to it because I think sometimes when we don't talk about things, there's shame to it. So if you're,
Hmm. Hmm.
feeling like, oh, it's so hard for me to see this woman succeed, then you're feeling shame about it. So
Yeah.
I always like to kind of like bring these things to the surface and normalize these things that it is. And I think it's, it happens in all different instances. Like,
Hmm.
if someone's trying to have their first and they're watching someone go through secondary infertility, which is where
Yes.
I am, it's like you already have one. Or if there's like
Yeah.
someone that has two kids and they're trying for their third, and it's like you already have two. And I think it just shows up it can
Hmm.
show up in a lot of ways. And I think normalizing that and just sort of like removing the shame or guilt for feeling those things is really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think acknowledging it is important because one day when you are pregnant, you're still probably going to carry some of that trauma with you. And then it's like, you get to the point of like going so hard in the depths in the trenches of IVF that like I was not prepared for pregnancy in terms of like all of the steps, all of the milestones, the, anatomy scan, this, and that, and then you have to prepare for birth. And so you're already tired and exhausted by the time you get pregnant because of all the IVF stuff you've gone through and all the
Yeah.
trauma that, now you just have to like, you're like, oh, I have to actually raise my child now. And so, because of that, like IVF doesn't allow you to make room for a lot of the other things that once you're pregnant, like that's just like everyone else that's pregnant, but it's not because you had to go through IVF to get there. So,
Yeah.
you even feel different compared to other friends that are pregnant that didn't have to use IVF to get pregnant. Because for us now, we're thinking about baby number two,
Hmm.
and now I have to start all over again, in
Yeah.
terms of the feelings and the emotions and that trauma that, you go through and like, well, what if it doesn't work? And whatever. I mean, it's different now because
Oh,
I have one. So
yeah.
I'm kind of like,
Oh,
well, if it doesn't
I don't
work,
know.
yeah, I mean, for me, at least for right now, it's different now because we have one. But at the same time, I know once we're like trying and transferring again, it's not going to be like, oh, well, if it doesn't work, it's fine. No, because
No,
you
right,
still
right.
want your baby, you know?
Yeah, it's your like deepest desire. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just sort of wanted to also just back up to talk about where your journey started. At what age did you and your partner start trying to conceive, and then sort of what was the road from there?
Yeah. So we met when we were 38. So we were already older when we met. And so, we decided very, early on, once we decided that we were, interested in being committed to each other and eventually getting married, that we would, try as soon as we were comfortable. And this was even before we were married, per se, because we just didn't know how hard it would be to get pregnant. And my OBGYN all along had been like, what are you doing? Are you trying? Are you not trying? Are you going to freeze your eggs? Are you not? And so by the time I was 38, which is another piece of advice that I would recommend, like, don't let anyone tell you that at 35 you're too old to freeze your eggs. You're not. Like, you may not get
Yeah.
50, but if you could get 10 or
We talk a
6.
lot about egg freezing on here, and I think that's excellent
Yeah.
advice. I froze at 37, and
Yeah.
which doing this podcast and talking to so many women and experts, you do sort of learn that like 35 is not the cliff, but it's
Yeah.
like the narrative that's been prominent, and it's terrifying. I think it
Yeah.
creates a lot of anxieties
It
and
does.
pressures. And I wonder for you, just to start with meeting your partner at 38, did you have
Hmm.
certain I met my partner at 34, and at
Okay.
34, like all of my friends were like married and like already
Yeah.
having babies. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm so behind. And that's another thing we talk about a lot on here is like
Yeah.
societal expectations and timelines. And I'm curious,
Yes.
like, did any of that come up for you?
I think it did. Like, I was always someone that wanted to get married, but I wasn't like super oppressed about it until I met the right person. And so, I was kind of always like the older person in my younger group of friends. But luckily, I did have a lot of friends in my group, even though they were younger than me, they still didn't have kids and they still, didn't even like have mates or anything like that. But I just think like growing up as a kid, there is a lot of pressure, like for me, more so to be married, more so than it was to have kids.
Mm,
My
okay.
mom was not telling me like, hey, have you thought about, freezing your eggs, or what are you doing to kind of like preserve your fertility, even though you're not married. It was just almost a lot of value and worth placed on, marriage first. And
Hmm.
looking back at that, now I just feel like, I get it, but it's not the best advice, because it's like the advice now that I would give my daughter would be like, hey, like, there's no rush to get married if you're not ready or if that's not what you want. But I do want you to consider if you want to have kids or not. And if you do, let's talk about
Yeah.
preserving that so that
Yeah.
you can eliminate some of that pressure, into getting married. So when we met at 38, we were both like, like having fun, and, we're very social people even still, but like, um, I just didn't think it would be that hard to get pregnant. Like, you try so hard all your life to not get pregnant, and
Yep.
then you're like, okay, I can get pregnant now. And you're like, but why is it not happening?
Well, I'm sure, and again, I want to hear more about your fertility journey. But no one told us. There was a lot we didn't know,
Yeah.
and I think the messaging was, up until certain ages, don't get pregnant. And no one's telling you how to get pregnant, or how hard it is to get pregnant, or how much has to go right in your
Hmm.
body to
Yeah.
actually get pregnant. And so you find yourself in these places of like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know any of this.
Yeah. That's exactly true. It's like, you didn't know any of this. And like, did anyone know, like, what embryos on day 5 were even then? Like, no, you won't know until you're in it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I don't know about you, but even being in it and every stage of my journey, like I learned so much more. There's so much I know now that I didn't know at my first transfer. It's like if I knew
Yeah.
what I know now, I never would have done my first transfer. So it's like
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
constantly learning.
Constantly. I mean, we've been through to finally have success. I mean, we were on our our third fertility clinic, and our fourth transfer. So it's like, every single, stage of that, every failed, situation, every failed clinic, it's always something new to learn. And I think, when I talk to people now that are going through infertility treatment and they're like, well, how do you just keep going? Because it's so disappointing. And I always say that I'm forever a student. And so I think that has kept me moving forwards. Like, well, I'm going to figure it out. Like, we're going to figure out what's not working and
Hmm.
how we can get there. If that means we have to go through a different clinic, try some alternative options. I mean, luckily now, there are so many ways now that you can become a parent. And once you wrap your head around that and you become accepting of that, then to me, it's almost like
Mm.
it's just a matter of time of when you'll become a parent. It's not if, you know?
I'm curious for you. I love what you just said there, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's
Mhm.
hard to get there to that place of acceptance. I think what
It is.
often happens is, and I think this is part of sort of external messaging and narratives, that we paint this picture and this vision of the way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then it's you have to grieve that vision and create a new vision.
Mhm.
So for you, yeah, I'm curious how you got to that. Well, maybe we're jumping ahead, but anyway, we'll get back to the history. But
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. But like, how did you, yeah, get to that place of acceptance?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know, but we use donor eggs to be able to finally conceive.
Yeah, I do know because I watched your YouTube.
Okay. Okay. And so thinking back to before that, I mean, I think in the beginning, I was always open to everything, even adoption, you know? And so for me, I mean, there was a moment of definitely having to grieve, maybe the loss of my genetics and things like that. But for me, what really helped me to become comfortable with that is like when I joined this Facebook group. It's called Every Shade of Infertility, and it's specifically for women of color who are going through infertility treatment and specifically want to use donor eggs, donor sperm, or donor embryos. So you
Hmm.
have to qualify like for that to be able to be accepted into the group. And so once I joined that group, I saw like all the stories that I read of all the women and their success stories, and they were posting pictures of their babies. And I was just like, man, all these like weird things I had in my head about the situation, which are valid. You wonder, like, is my child going to know that I'm their mom? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do
Mm.
that? And you're looking at this baby, like gazing into, its mother's eyes, like they know nothing different. And then even the stories of the women that, how they share with them when they get older, um,
Mm.
their stories. And, it's a beautiful birth story. I mean, that's how I will be painting it to my daughter. And I've already had conversations. She's only 10 months, but like at the day she came home, I've already started the conversation with her about her beautiful story of conception so that by the
Mm.
time she gets older, it's really like dress rehearsal for you to have the conversation, but it's just something that she knows is a part of her everyday life. I mean, we have blended
Normal, yeah.
families all the time. There's blended families of, families having to adopt a family member or, people, adopting kids or, people coming together through marriage and they have like, half siblings that they've been raised with and they don't know anything else. I mean, I've come from a very big family and I was raised with my cousins growing up and they're my cousins, but I think of them more like my sister and brother,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And then this might sound silly, but I've always been a dog person. I've had a dog since I was 5 years old. And,
Oh,
I loved those dogs and my dogs that I have now. Like you can't tell my dogs that I have now that they were not birthed by me. I mean, their attachment to me is just like my dog.
yeah. Yeah.
And so it was really listening and watching other people's stories about it, and talking to them. Like, how did you get to the point of being accepting about choosing a donor, deciding to be a single mom by choice? Like, how did you, for my friends that are single moms by choice, like they don't have any genetics. Like they're not married, they don't have a partner who's, sperm or whatever that they've, that's a part of their child. So they have donor sperm and donor eggs,
Hmm. Hmm.
And when I see, them with their children, like you can't tell me that like that bond is not as solid as it would be if they were biologically theirs. Um,
Yeah, I think that's so
yeah.
helpful to hear, and that group sounds amazing because
Hmm.
I think a lot of women are not at that place of acceptance or they worry. And I had a
Yeah.
guest on, a dear friend of mine who unfortunately had a really, long cancer fight, which she
Hmm.
won, but her, it sacrificed her fertility. And she's
Yeah.
sort of not there of like accepting not having a biological child. So I think it's so helpful to hear those stories, to hear your stories, to hear you say how deep the bondage. And my thought on that is like how deeply desired this child was.
Yes. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, we worked so hard to have you intentionally. You were meant to be here. You were very intentional about you being here. We wanted you to be here. And I have this story, and I'm actually writing a children's book about my daughter's conception story. And it's for parents to use as a tool
Amazing.
to be able to explain to them how they were conceived. And so,
That's incredible. I saw
thank
that too
you.
on yeah, that's incredible. What a great
Thank you.
resource.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, because that's the other thing too. Like, even in the space of books, like, how do we explain it to our child? Because some people choose not to tell, and that's completely up to them, completely personal. But in the world now of like 23andMe and all these DNA
Yeah.
and family tree things, like, they're
Yeah.
going to find out. They're going to find out. So is it better that it comes from you in a way where you feel confident about it and you are letting your child know how loved they are? Because that's what it is. It's like, you are this love that we went this far to be able to have you, you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
Or do you want them to find out on their own and feel like they've been, led astray and not told the truth? I mean, it's everyone's choice to do what they want to do. But I know that, like, for us, our doctors recommended that we get, counseling before we decided to go with donor eggs, to make sure that we were thinking about all the possible scenarios of this
Oh,
situation and make sure that we were on board with sharing, with our daughter how she was conceived. And so that was very helpful.
is that typically standard of the process? Or it's just a recommendation? Because
It's
I
not
think that's
standard.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's not standard. I mean, because we were with another fertility clinic before the one that we had success with, and they weren't adamant about it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think if they even recommended it.
Mm,
And we were using donor eggs there, but we only got like 4 donor eggs, and we ended up with 1 embryo, which we knew that we wanted the opportunity to have full genetic siblings.
hmm.
So even if, that one luckily worked, we wouldn't be able to have like full genetic siblings, from there. So we wanted, and then we also wanted, that's the other thing, diversity. It's hard to find a donor of color, period. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so, the donor that we chose at our other clinic, was not even a woman of color. And so, um, I also spoke to another friend, and she was like, you need to love your donor. Like, this is not like anything that you can give back. You need to love the donor choice that you made,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
you know, it's hard enough getting to the point of accepting that, and you don't want to have any regrets about who you chose.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so that was another reason why we switched clinics, because I almost kind of felt like, well, this is all they have, so I'll just choose
Mm,
the best of everything. And she's like, this is not that kind of a choice.
exactly.
you know?
Well, yeah, just to back up again, sort of where did you and your husband come to know that you would have to go down the path of fertility treatments? And what was that like
Yeah.
to kind of be in to know that, to learn that, to
Mhm.
then start down that road?
So it was probably when, let's see, this was probably maybe like a year and a half into our relationship. Our first experience, like I hear a lot of people say, was not great at all. I mean, this was like our first consultation. We didn't love the doctor that we saw. You're already very vulnerable and nervous going in there, and you're feeling inadequate, and, we kept trying naturally. And, my OBGYN put us on, he had me on Clomid. So we tried that with timed intercourse, and that wasn't working. And so I'm not the kind of person that is going to tirelessly try things with no results for like 10 years. I'm
Oh
not,
my God, I'm the
I'm
same as you.
just,
Oh,
I have
yeah.
no
Hmm.
time. I have no time,
Hmm.
like no capacity for that. And so, after about a year of that, or like maybe 6 months or so, he wrote us a referral to go see a fertility specialist. And so, um, once we had that, I have family members who've also, gone through IVF. So it wasn't something that was like something that I had not heard before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was open to it. And then, we started at that clinic, and that doctor was just awful. And I don't even
What
think he
was,
had our.
I mean, I hear you, I've had those experiences, but when you say awful, in what way?
So I think it was awful because, for one, our appointment was probably the last appointment of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before COVID, so everything was in person. And so we're sitting in his office. I don't even think he had our right records because he kept saying that I had a tube that was blocked. And I was like, no, I don't have a blocked tube.
Oh God.
And I'm like, are you sure you have the right person? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, well, no, maybe it's not blocked, but I don't know about that tube. I don't like that tube. And so I'm very big on bedside manner. And I'm just like, come on, like, that's not what you say. And so we left that appointment. He told us the process of IVF and like what you do and stuff. And he did explain that, like, with my age, eggs become an issue, the older you get, and you can keep trying and trying, and maybe you'll have some success, but the percentages of you having success are going to keep going down. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can
Now, how old are you at this point?
I think I was 39 at this point.
Okay.
39.
Okay.
And so I thought I would be fine because my sister had her son at 39 naturally. And so I was just like, oh, well, why is it not happening for me? And so, we went through that, didn't like that doctor, and we're just like, it was expensive and just all these things. We didn't have coverage to cover it at the time, so we would have had to pay out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So we switched clinics, found another clinic that was recommended by friends and people that had had success there, and had a much better experience with that doctor. Much better bedside manner, but overall it did not work there. And I felt like a lot of their protocols were a little outdated. Because I do tons of research, and I was just looking at other clinics. And then, the protocol that he had me on, we tried twice there. And it was almost like he didn't really want to change much. And so my thing is like, we're paying out of pocket. We can't afford to do the same thing and think it's going to work without making some adjustments.
I am the same. I'm hearing you so deeply. Like, I'm the same as you. I'm like, why? Even after the first time not working, I'm like, I also changed clinics from my first transfer to my second. Same awful experience, terrible bedside manner. And I'm like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm not wasting a minute.
Yeah.
And after that, had a new clinic, successful transfer, then miscarriage. And even then, it's like, I'm not, thank you. Like, I'm not going to go back and do the same thing and expect a different result. And so I think it's really important to highlight here sort of that like, one, if you don't feel comfortable with the doctor, switch. This is very vulnerable, potentially very expensive if you don't have coverage. Like, just knowing that you can do that and you should think about doing that is important to highlight. Like, finding the right place, the right clinic, the right doctor to like be by your side through this. I think a lot of women are just like, it's good enough. It's good enough. So
yeah. I mean, my recommendation is like, I always suggest that people create, have like 1 to 3 consultations, like not one, like at least 2, 3 to 4 consultations before you decide on a clinic. And like, the biggest thing that I would, recommend to people to ask is like, so what if things don't work? How flexible are we with changing protocols?
Great question.
Like how, like, does that mean we will change medications right away? Does that mean that we will, look at some other things? And then also it's like, how do you all, like, another great question I think to ask is, how do you guys, handle things when it doesn't work out? Because how long is it going to take for me to get a follow-up call to kind of like do a postmortem and understand what happened and all these kinds of things? And, like, how comfortable are we making changes? Because, I know that there are people that stick with the same clinic and they've had success, but I think in those situations, it works because those doctors are like, like, I'm going to fight for you. We're going to try something else. Just
Hmm.
stick with me. We're going to try this again. We're going to try something different. But if your doctor is not saying that, and they may not always say that, but you should be the one like asking and advocating. And so I think fertility clinics are different than like regular doctors, I think, because we don't have as much time to figure it out as other doctors. And a lot of people don't have coverage. They're paying for it out of pocket.
Yeah.
And my thing is like, if it doesn't feel right, switch.
Yeah.
Just change.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think in all of this, there's such an emotional, hugely emotional component to it, and it has to feel right. I mean, there's so much other anxieties and stressors and upsetting things
Yes.
you're going to go through, even when you're at a good place. So you've got to be
Yeah.
at a good place. And you mentioned before, very similar to you, I do a lot of my own research, maybe sometimes too much, but
Same.
um, how did you find that doing that research? How did you find that helpful to you to go into your appointments to advocate for yourself? Like, did it help you in that way?
Oh yeah. I mean, it made me feel like I had some sense of control in a situation where you have no control.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it made me feel like, I was prepared. I was, advocating for myself. And I was also felt like it helped to make me feel like more of a partner with my doctor than someone that's just taking orders and someone is just telling me what I need and what I need. And I'm just like, okay, well, why am I taking this medication? How do you think it's going to help? How do you think it's going to be different? And it made me just feel, like I said, more empowered, but also to gain a little bit more control of a roller coaster ride that was out of control. And so, that's what I learned. Like, I never had to advocate for myself this much in my life until going through IVF, you know?
Yeah. I always say I'm like my own detective.
Yeah.
Like, just, yeah, like, which is I had this moment too where my partner, I was in bed, like researching everything, and he's like, you're overload
Mhm.
right now. Like, you're stressing yourself out. And I was in tears. I might have already said this on the podcast, but I was just like, you don't understand. Like, I have to have the knowledge to ask the questions. Like, I
Yeah.
had no questions the first time around.
Yeah.
Like, I should have
Same.
had more questions. I should have advocated harder, but I just didn't know. So you feel this pressure to like do all the research that you kind of have to, even if you have a great doctor. I think it's important to kind of
Yeah.
do your own research.
Yeah, because that research and researching is what got me out of the trenches of feeling depressed when things didn't work. Because the first time around, I just thought it would work. And
Same.
so I was so blindsided when it didn't work. Also because it didn't work, but also because of the money that we spent out of pocket. I mean, we probably put 10 grand into the first round, because we didn't have, coverage the way that we do now. But it was just like, where are we going to get money again? You
I
know?
know. Yeah.
And how are we going to do this? And so all I had was my research. I'm researching more affordable clinics that are more modern in terms of their approach to protocols. I'm researching like, do I need to get a new job to get better insurance? All these kinds of things.
Hmm.
And for me, that research is what, like I always encourage people, take your time to grieve because you need that. Like with not trying to
Yeah.
fix anything, just grieve. And then when you're ready, just, if you're ready and you want to jump back in there with your research, and then decide if you want to do it again.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like, and I'll speak for myself here, and we talk again a lot about like timelines and pressures, and sometimes that, it is internal. It's like you have the vision, you have the timeline in your mind. And again, all of these things are completely out of our control. I
Hmm.
felt like for me, there were moments that like, I mean, I I still don't think I've like fully grieved because I felt like I have to get back on the horse and I have to find the next thing and I have
Hmm.
to fix the thing and what's wrong with. So I feel
Yeah.
like for me the cycle has been like I'm in a hole for 2 or 3 days and then I'm back to the
Yeah.
researching. So I think you're absolutely right.
Hmm.
And I'm a therapist, so of course we should take the
Hmm.
time to grieve and feel all the emotions. But then I
Yeah.
think there's this other thing at play that's like I'm running out of time. I
Yeah.
mean, me myself, I'm 43,
Hmm.
and so I think the time thing kind of combats
It
the
does.
ability to grieve in the way that we should.
It does. I think if I was, I mean, I don't know. I think the time thing is because I have friends that have had to use donor eggs in their like mid, like just being in their mid 30s. And so they feel the same urgency that I feel 10 years older, 10 years younger than me.
Hmm.
I think once you put the idea in your heart that you want to become a parent, like there's nothing, you cannot unsee that, you know? And
Yeah.
so that is always going to be the driving force into like, how quick do I get back in this, you know? I do believe in taking time to grieve, you know, but I also, you know, say, and like the only people that can say this to each other, I feel like are people going through infertility. It's like, take your time
Hmm.
to grieve, but when you're ready, jump back in there because
Yeah.
some people take too much time to grieve, and these situations become so devastating for them that, like, you know, they will go through a cycle of a transfer or something, and then they will take 3 years before they try it again. And then maybe it doesn't work again. And then they take more time. And then it's just like you become so traumatized to that where it's like, you know, this is a numbers game. So sometimes it's going to take a couple of times for it to work, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and even the clinic that we're at now, what I loved so much about them was like, you know, we want to help you guys become parents, but it might take 2 or 3 times before we get there, you know, even using a donor. And so setting that realistic expectation already put me in the mind frame of like, okay, brace yourself, like go through the motions, go through the process, but like jump back on the horse when you can, because
Yeah.
what if that next time works, you know?
Well, I
Um,
think, I think having those realistic expectations communicated to you is so hugely important.
yeah,
And again, back to where you choose to have this journey and what doctor you choose to have, is important because, you
yeah,
know, I've had experiences too where expectations
yeah.
were not communicated in like a realistic way. And I just wanted to add one thing, what you said earlier, point to like, you like the when you have a desire in your mind, I don't think it's about age in terms of
Yeah,
like the timing. It's like when you want the thing. You
yeah,
could be 32, you could be 30. You know,
yeah,
again, of course, there's this biological component to like as you age and egg quality, although there's debates on that too. But yeah, I think it's such an individual thing. It's like at whatever age you are, you decide you want something, whether it's partnership or career change or a child. It's like we want it now. And I
yeah,
think patience can be a really hard thing.
yeah. It's hard. It's very hard. And, you know, it's one of those things where like I would never tell someone going through this journey or really anything like calm down, be patient, just wait, you'll have your turn. I will never tell anyone that because I know how it feels to have that burning desire in your heart to want something and to want it to work so bad and to be willing to go to like whatever lengths possible to research and how much time and effort and energy you put into it. I mean, you know, it can definitely consume you. And I do feel like there should be
Um,
balance of like, okay, don't let it like take over your life to where you can't just enjoy regular things. But, you know, are you going to be able to enjoy regular things until you get to the point, you know, of what your heart's desire is? It's always a balance. But I would never tell anyone going through this that wants to become a parent to just, oh, it'll happen and when it's supposed to, or those kinds of things, which to me are just, you know, people that say it are usually not people going through infertility. And so they mean well, but they're
right.
very like passive harmful. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
and
I actually
dismissive.
did one myself. There's all these like great reels of like what not to say to someone
Yeah.
going through
Yeah.
infertility.
Yeah.
What would you say? And you mentioned the Facebook community and support page. Like, what would you say are other things that helped you through your journey, like helped you emotionally, helped your mental health, helped you find that balance of still being able to enjoy
Hmm.
everyday life, but also being consumed by the fertility journey? Are there like a few things that you would say stood out as being really helpful to you.
Yeah. So number one, I had a therapist. I've always been an advocate and very strong proponent for therapy. So I was seeing a therapist even before going through my fertility journey, but not regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I made that a very big deal to make sure that I had someone that specialized in, like women's health and pregnancy, postpartum, and fertility struggles. Um, and you can look on psychologytoday.com to be able to find someone. You can really get very specific about like their specialties. That was
Mm-hmm.
number one, because one thing I think that I had to realize is like my husband grieves things differently than I do, So like when our first transfer didn't work, I thought he would be showing his devastation more than he did, the way that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just, to me, it seemed like he was just going back to regular life. Like he didn't have to take off any time from work. He was, still able to hang out with friends and, have like appear to have a good time. But that's just the way that he copes with, devastation. It's not
Mm-hmm.
to like project it outward or show it on his face the way that I would. Um, and so that can cause a little bit of conflict sometimes. But having a therapist really helped me to understand that, everyone grieves differently. And so even though he's not showing it the same way you are, you have to be flexible and give him space to feel the way that he's going to feel, how he's going to feel.
Yeah.
And then like, having a therapist also helps you to like, you're not going to be able to get the support and emotional support and everything from like your closest friends that aren't going through it too. Like I found the most support through strangers that were going to appointments the same day that I was. They were waiting for results the same way that I were,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so um therapy, finding community, like I did through Facebook groups. Facebook is a great place to start. You can look up your clinic. They may have a Facebook group that is maybe started by
Mm.
patients that aren't affiliated with the clinic. There's a lot of those out there. You can look by like your city, your state, or whatever, to be able to help find, like a support group. And then I would say like I poured a lot of time into self-care. So I was getting massages. Like I got a massage membership at like Massage Envy at the time, and Hand and Stone or something like that. I was pouring a lot of time into self-care because like this process makes you feel so insecure about your body.
Oh, yeah. I
So
mean, for me,
insecure.
it's made me at times hate my body, like be
Yeah.
so disappointed in my body. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so sad because you think, oh, I'm a woman. The one thing I should be able to do is have a kid. And when you can't, like, it's so, 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 like, sad for yourself, and it can make you feel very insecure. So I made sure that I tried to do things like, massage therapy helped me a lot. Exercising with friends, like that made me feel really good about myself. Being able to, like, accomplish something small, like a rep in like a set of things that I'm trying to do or something like that, made me feel really good.
Mm.
And then just also my hobby, my craft, sharing my story actually made me feel better because I felt like there was anytime I would share something, and if I would be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't share this, or maybe this is not something that I should be open about, there would be like five other people that be like, oh my God, I went through the same exact thing. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you
Yeah.
shared it, because it made me feel so much better to know that someone else was going through the same thing too. And so like YouTube and content creation became my hobby to the point now where it's like my legit, like permanent part-time job. I work full time,
Amazing.
but like content creation, has become like my passion project that I do and I pour a lot into,
It's
even now
amazing.
in motherhood. And so I would say like getting a hobby, or would help. Like a lot of people also recommend, I did this as well. A friend of mine makes these like IVF coloring books. And
Oh, I
so
saw that on one of your videos and you were packing that for your, yes, 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 yeah.
yeah, and there's something about coloring with like colored pencils that just
Oh my God.
makes
When I
your
do that with my son, I'm just like zoned in. It's
yes,
just, yeah,
yes. Like
yeah.
that helped me so much. I mean, now that I have my baby, like I wish I had time to color in a coloring book. Maybe when she starts coloring,
When she starts
I
coloring,
don't
yeah,
have
you'll be
time
doing it
again.
with her. Yeah.
But that was just like when I was like watching a show or just wanted some quiet time and I didn't feel like maybe reading a book or something, I was just coloring and that really helped a lot. So those are the things that I did. I mean, there's probably tons of other things that you can do. I also think meditation is very good. There are meditations out there specifically designed for people going through IVF. So like through the Expectful app, highly recommend it.
Mm.
You do have to pay for it, but they have very specific meditations for like preparing for an embryo transfer, preparing for an
Oh,
egg
amazing. I'm going
retrieval.
to check that out. I haven't heard of that. Amazing.
Yeah, preparing like going through the 2 week wait, meditations for that. Like you need specific things like that during that time. And so I would listen to that kind of stuff, like right before bed or there are like affirmations you can listen to. I would like to listen to that taking my dogs for a walk or something. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. I love all that. And I think it's identifying whatever the things are that keep you connected to yourself, because I
Yeah.
think you can lose, like we were saying, like the being all consumed by it, you can lose so many parts of yourself when you go through this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
identifying what those things are and pouring into those things are so important.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I know you're putting your story out there, you're creating content, you're advocating. Where do you still see that there are gaps? I mean, I think there's still gaps. Where
Yeah.
do you think there's still gaps in this fertility and fertility space?
Um, there are tons of gaps, especially in the African American community, especially because, culturally we are raised to not show weakness and share too much of our issues in that way. And so I'm always going to be an advocate in this space, especially, as a woman of color and, trying to like, represent, my story and hope that it inspires someone else. But I've also noticed some gaps too, because, in working with different clinics, people don't know, like, what do I ask? What do I do? How do I keep track of everything? I mean, that was a big thing for me is like, how am I staying organized about, my appointments, the results, all the doctors, what are the consultation questions that I need to ask? So I've actually created a digital IVF planner journal that you can either print it or you can use it like and write in it on your iPad. Because I get so many questions from people, even in my DMs now. I probably get at least like 1 or 2 DMs a week about those kinds of questions and working with the previous clinic we worked with, which is CNY, and they're a very big travel clinic. So trying to stay organized about everything and do all your monitoring remotely, is
Oh,
requires a
yeah. Can you
certain
explain
level.
what you mean when you say traveling clinic?
Well, they are considered not traveling, like, but a lot of people travel to them because,
Oh, travel to them. Okay.
yeah, because they're so affordable. And so they're like one of the busiest clinics in the United States because of that. People come from all over to go
Hmm.
there, and so the level of like type A-ness you have to stay on top of that between making sure that they get the paperwork from, your local lab core that you're sending, your blood test results to, and your
Got it. Okay.
imaging center you're going to down the street, but they have to make sure it's faxed by a certain time. Like that level of coordination for someone who's just going through IVF probably for the first time can probably seem like a little bit of a nightmare.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, in our clinic now is in Utah and I live in Atlanta. So we travel back and forth for that. And so I decided, I was like, how can I help people to kind of maybe stay organized, to kind of give them, here are like all the consultation questions that I would ask, in going to a new clinic. Here are a couple of coloring pages to color, you know, in the process, and you can keep it all in one place. So, in trying to fill those gaps, so now when people ask me questions about like, well, how do I deal with the monitoring and this and that, and how do I like keep track of that? But I can refer them to my digital planner that I created, because for me, like staying organized, like I said, like in a place where there is no control and things are chaotic, having just a little bit of organization and a little
Yes.
bit of like keeping things together makes you feel a little bit more in control.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, whether it's egg freezing or IVF or whatever the fertility journey you're going through, is like life is not stopping as you're going through
It's
this,
not.
right? So you still have to do all the other responsibilities,
Yeah.
work, tasks,
Yeah.
laundry, all the things are still happening. And then you add on this
Yeah.
other huge responsibility to kind of keep
Yeah.
track of and organize.
And you need a place to be able to dump things and move on to the next task because you still have a one-on-one with your boss maybe the next morning, you know? So your fertility clinic might have just called you and been like, okay, so here are the next monitoring appointments you need to schedule. And, you know, you need a place to like dump all of that stuff. So I have a digital planner that I said you can download, either the PDF version where you can just print it out and write in it, or you can just edit it on your iPad. And then I actually have a Notion template for those people who are like super, you know, high level organized about project management. And it has all these little databases in it where you can like keep
Amazing.
track of your cycle and, you know, your consultation questions and all of those things. And then it rolls up into like this master calendar that you can keep track of everything, you know.
Where can everybody find that?
So the IVF digital planner, I have it listed on my stand stores in the link in my bio. I haven't fully launched it yet, so I haven't really like it's available, but I haven't launched it yet like on my website. Um
Okay, well, but hopefully by the time this comes out, it's
yeah, I'm
been
going
ready to
to
go.
it will be able to be found basically just on my website. You can find it there. Which is iamsherryyvette.com. Or you can find it in my link in bio on my Instagram. You can find it there now on my Instagram and my TikTok. And then it will be in all my YouTube video descriptions also. So I'll have both the Notion template and the the iPad and printable version linked. And then I've also created actually some meditations as well that I'll have available for people for this process, and specifically also for people going through using donor eggs or donor sperm.
It's incredible. It's
Yeah.
so amazing to me to see women or people take these sort of painful journeys and turn it into something really purposeful
Yeah.
and meaningful. And I'm wondering for you, with all that you're doing now in this space and all these resources that you're supporting other women and people with,
Yeah.
does it sort of all make sense that this was your journey now?
It does. Yeah. I used to wonder like, why me, you know, and I was also trying to find out like, what is my passion in life, you know, career wise? You know, I mean, I've worked, you know, in corporate for a very long time. You know, I spent some time as like a hairstylist. I did lash extensions. I've always had this like beauty interest as well. And so content creation allows me to kind of do all of that in one place. Um, and helping people has always been something that I've been passionate about and wanted to do, but I just never knew like what do I help them with? You know, like I can give them
Hmm.
some nice hair color or I can make their lashes look nice, but like I want to help people with like a real deep rooted problem that they're having to try to make them feel better, you know? And so for me, I feel like, you know, at 38, 39, I mean, I'm trying to think of when we started documenting our journey. It wasn't at our very first clinic because that one didn't work out, but it was definitely at the second clinic. And so I had been making videos and uploading them and not telling anyone about it probably for a year
Oh,
before
wow.
I even shared it like on my Instagram. And I was so nervous when I shared that first post, and I was just like, gosh, you know, this is such a vulnerable moment, and letting people know like that my husband and I are one in eight. And you want to share, my plan was to share when we were successful. But I was
Mm,
just like, what about when if you share before you're successful? That's when people probably need you the most, is
totally.
when you're not successful. What do? You still don't have a baby, you know? And so I feel like now that you asked me that question, I really found my passion in life at probably almost 40. You know what I mean? And my
Yeah.
purpose. And like,
Yeah.
you know, if you ask me what I want to be doing in 10 years, you know, do I want to be working in corporate I don't know. I mean, I really love my job. I like what I do. I work with nonprofits, so I get to kind of like, talk and help in that way. But my passion would be to be a content creator, an IVF advocate, and speak on panels and go to conferences and go to events and help people as much as I can. I mean, that would be my like dream job to be able to do this
You're
full time.
doing it. You're doing it. You're
Thank
doing it.
you.
Everything you're doing is amazing and needed, and we
Thank you.
need more people speaking out about all of this, helping women advocate, helping fill the gaps. I mean, you're already doing it, and I love that you
Thank
said, and
you.
I think it's so important for this podcast because it is called Quiet the Clock. I think we
Yeah.
all get stuck on timelines and when we should have certain
Mhm.
things. So I love you saying, and it's so important for the audience to hear that you found your passion at 40.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also what choosing a donor helped me to realize, is that that kind of helped quiet the clock too, because it's almost like freezing everything and preserving it in time. I mean, I'm 45. I just turned 45. So, no, I'm not going to like wait 5 more years to do another transfer. But like, I don't have to worry about some of the same things that I might have had to worry about, like, if we didn't use a donor and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, it's always such a balance of like, you don't let people tell you that you're too old for anything, because you're not, you know what I mean? But at the same time, we do still hear that clock regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, having our conversation today, I think it's as internal as it is external, right?
Yeah.
We do have external messaging and sort of societal frameworks that tell us,
Hmm.
which are BS, but then that internal clock that's like, I want this thing and I want it now. And
Yeah.
I imagine you've experienced, and even hearing you say, you're 45 and having, the donor eggs and just taking, what does it mean or what does it feel like to be able to take that pressure off?
Oh, it's so freeing. I mean, it's so freeing. Even preparing for our next transfer, like I'm just not really like super rushed. I mean, I have like a timeline, but I don't feel as rushed as I did like the first time around. Because, and even also, like, I remember being in doctor's appointments, and, of course, I'm considered high risk because of my age, but I'm like, but am I really? Because
We're geriatric.
yeah. And also like, our donor was in her like, mid to almost like late 20s when she donated. So, some of the things that I think I might be more worried about, at my age with that, another thing I didn't have to worry so much about. You worry about everything. Um but yeah, it's just one of those things where you're never going to not worry. That's just what I would put that out there.
Yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
going to be something to worry about. Literally always.
Yeah. I think it's about letting that live there, but not letting it be the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Cause again, like the worry can overshadow
Yeah.
all these amazing things.
Yeah. And then the worry is not going to change anything. That's what I said. Like, I can worry myself 10 more gray hairs and it's not going to change anything. So, do you want to, like, be mentally in a good place and just let things, go with the flow as much as possible, and do what you can, but just knowing, like, like, I just think that you do have to just kind of let go and release at some point, because I'm a very, like, my background is in project management. So my job was to worry about the outcome before it happened,
Mm.
you know?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so for a project manager to go through IVF where you have no control over that outcome, this is no test you can study for. That was a very hard thing to like wrap my mind around, to change. It's like you got to let go a little bit, because you're going to worry yourself and the same thing is still going to happen. And it's like, what if it works? you know,
Right. What if it
what
works?
if it
Yeah,
works?
I know. There's a lot of things I tell my clients too is like, ooh, try not to be so outcome focused and just more journey
Yes.
focused.
Yeah.
And also, if we're going to think the negative thing, let's make room for the positive things. Like both are
Hmm.
equally
Yeah.
possible. Easier said than done, but I think it
Yeah.
is so helpful and beneficial to our mental health if we can kind of like embody some of those things.
Yeah. I mean, I even think now as a parent, I'm trying to make sure that, my daughter also just enjoys her life without worrying about it so much, And so I am very like subconscious about like, well, how planned does this situation need to be? Like, am I over planning it? Am I teaching her, to over plan and not just like enjoy life and things, But it's always like it's always a constant battle of like, how much is too much control and how much is being too lax about things. Um, so yeah, I think it's always a balance, just always a constant balance.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here so much and sharing this story, and everything you said today resonates so deeply with me. And I know with the audience. And if there's throughout your journey and everything you've been through and all the ways you've advocated and everything that you've learned and researched, is there one, and you've shared so much already, but like one final thought you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah. I mean, I say this to everyone, and it's just that I'm rooting for you. Whatever you decide, like some people give up and they're just like, this is just not for me. It's too much. And I'm like, I will support you in that and, and everything else. And my thing is just like, find your tribe, find your people that make you feel good about what you're going through, because it helps so much during the hard times to have people that you feel like understand you,
Oh,
yeah.
amazing. Well, I'm rooting for you in all that you
Thank
do.
you.
I love everything you're doing. And again, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Of course. I'm rooting for you too. And good luck with everything. And thank you for having me.
I think it's no secret that I love the Little Words Project bracelets. I have about 6 or 7 on my arm, ones that have been given to me, ones I've bought myself. I love giving them as gifts. I think they're so inspirational for me personally. They're nice little reminders throughout my day to have hope, to be, have strength, to be in good energy. I just love the bracelets so much. I love giving them. I love receiving them. And if you want to check them out and you want to give it as a gift or get one for yourself, you can use our code QTC for 15% off your first order. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. You guys, I'm really excited. We just created all this amazing merch. And so if you're loving the podcast and you want to support our cause and continue to hear amazing episodes, please support us by buying some merch. I am living in these sweatshirts every day. We have a range of colors. We have hoodies, we have mugs, we have hats, we have journals. We have all of the things. And I love having them on because it's just a reminder to quiet the clock, to slow down, to like let life unfold and be happy. So there's meaning and purpose behind wearing it too, which is a nice reminder. So check out our website, quiettheclock.com, to get your merch.